Hey everyone, it's another episode of Growth with Tacos. We've got John Marco, myself, and joining us later today, once he's off work, will be Visht, who had been with us earlier in the season. So today is January 6th, and that is normally the day that the new president is made the official president-elect by the reading of the votes, not just the actual submission of the votes, but the reading of the votes, because our system was invented before the internet, right? So that's a different day. And I think most people watching this are certainly aware of the riot that has happened in DC today. So this being one of your current events, as well as just random stuff we talk about, we're gonna talk about that. John Marco, man, you're a very reasoned individual and measured in your responses. What's like the first thing that comes to your mind that you want to say about this, dude?
Just how unfortunate it is in general. One of the most defining characteristics of this democracy in its 240 plus years of existence is a peaceful transfer of power, which cannot in any degree be said in almost anywhere else around the world, as long as it has been going on. And, as trying to be a shiny example of the good democracy, what good democracy can be, we dropped the ball, to put it very, very lightly. And it's easy to see the partisan views on whatever side you're on as to what's playing out today. But all that aside, it's just something that we're gonna have to reflect upon for generations, because it should never have gotten to a point that was even possible.
Yeah, it's unprecedented for sure, and I can't I don't know if you would qualify this as a coup attempt or not, because it was certainly an attempt to stop the established democratic process, right? And I don't want to be like that inflammatory of like, oh yes, this was a coup, or no, that's not a coup, or whatever. But like, it is absolutely deeply concerning that enough Americans decided to do exactly that and put a stop to the democratic process. And the most boggling thing about it is, I guarantee you, every single one of them there considers themselves to be a patriot, right? I guarantee you that all of them think that what they're doing is trying to institute the real popular will of the public, right? They believe that America is built on the will of the public, and I guarantee you that they think that they're trying to institute that will, right? Democracy in its truest intent, right?
And that's the other aspect of it that's just so unfortunate, because it's not like these people are going out there trying to instigate an agenda that benefits them. They truly feel like they're fighting for the beliefs of this country.
Right.
And in their minds and everything that they know, like I saw a video of when the Capitol building was breached. And as these protesters were approaching the law enforcement line inside the building, they were trying to tell the law enforcement folks that, we're here for you guys as much as here for us. Like, they really think that they're on their side, even though they may not know it, or may not be able to realize it in their point of view. But that's what makes the situation all the more concerning, because it's not like these people are intentionally trying to be a force of wrong or evil. They truly think they're on the right side. So compared to other, and regardless of whether one would label this a coup attempt or not, directly or indirectly, it's undeniable that the events that transpired today are a general step towards such a direction, regardless. And we're receiving unfortunate reactions from around the world, other countries that look up to America as a democracy, as an example of democracy, and just falling short for someone that promotes so much around the world. But yeah, it's something that, and unfortunately, on a normal election year, this formal process that happened on the Hill today is such a random blip on the average person's radar. Like, they would never think about. It's just a ceremonial formality, to put it very broadly.
Under normal
the
circumstances,
average American, yeah. The average American today, the only thing that really matters to him is the election day, on election year, and then the inauguration. Everything just seamlessly transitions in between because of that peaceful transfer of power. That right now is just difficult to comprehend what's going to happen.
Yeah, man, it really is an unreal thing altogether. Rob, I'm gonna let Rob into the room. Hey, Rob,
Yeah.
glad you're here, man. So we've already discussed the first, I guess, impressions of this. You know, how people are really genuinely think that they're fighting for the country when they decided to storm the Capitol building and actually stop the democratic process that we've had for over 200 years. But it is, of course, a deeply concerning thing to all of us. I don't know if you want to offer your first thoughts, dude.
I kind of missed out on what you guys had, but I'm
Yeah,
sure.
You're up to speed. What are your first thoughts on it?
I mean, dude, I was shocked. I guess it's just one way to put it. Just absolutely shocked, because I can't believe that we are living in this crazy time right now where people could just like storm in like that and claim democracy when it's everything but democracy right here. And I also can't help, but then after a while, as I was like thinking about this, I got kind of angry at one point, because I was like, man, like, how come the police aren't doing anything compared to what happened with the Black Lives Matter movement last year? But then I was talking to my friend about it, and he said, well, logically, if the police were to fire, that's going to just cause that's war at that point, and these guys are armed. So
Yeah.
that's why, so I was like, you know what, in that type of situation, I'm like, what can you really do? I don't think Capitol Hill is ready for something like this.
Well, you can, and they did send in the National Guard, which did manage to retake control. But anyway, I want to address what SVT put here. It said that it wasn't breached. There are videos of police letting the crowd in. From there, the rioting started, which only seems to have crystal clear coverage by mainstream media channels. I would be very interested in seeing videos of the police letting the crowd in. I haven't seen that, and I don't think that you're lying. I believe you. If you can post a link to that in the comments, I will put a link to it. I'm going to show you a video of a few individuals actively breaking into the building, though, via a window and breaking the glass. So let me try pulling that up in 1 second here.
Yeah, but some of the images I saw were extraordinary. Like the shot of the interior of the House or Senate, one of the floors. Well, let's go ahead and play this.
Doors. We saw a photo, which was just unbelievable that is happening in the U.S., never mind the U.S. Capitol. It looked like law enforcement with their arms drawn. We're actually looking at video right now of these anarchists interaction and these people who were involved in this insurrection. They broke the glass in the United States Capitol, and now they are climbing through the window. This happened
So that is definitely, I'm gonna say that is definitely breaking in.
Yes.
Yeah. I don't think anybody can deny that. But that doesn't mean that perhaps they weren't allowed in at another point, at another place by a person of authority. So again, if you can provide that video, I would be honored to see it, and I'll even show it live. So yeah, I want to say, like, Rob, I think you made a good point that it's a lot more difficult, of course, for the government to use physical, particularly weaponized force, if you're opposing. I don't want to use the word opposing, but if you're opposite, people are also.
We can say opposing. Right? They are opposing. Yeah.
I don't like to.
Stuff,
Right. I just don't like to think about it as like, oh, hey, government versus people, right? Like that's not true. Healthy, or government versus Republicans. That's just not a healthy mentality, right?
Yes, but the unfortunate thing is what has transpired today has only fueled those that think it's the government versus the people.
Yeah.
I
would say
especially with the, in my opinion, appropriate strong words from the vice president, from Mitch McConnell, condemning all of this in every regard. And tying into that, this is just tearing apart the GOP even harder, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. Because I mean, honestly, like, it's what I fear is going to happen is that's going to cause more divide, like, especially for example, people who are Democrats or who are more on the liberal leading side. They're going to use this to say, okay, well, that's all Republicans, right? But the reality is, like, I wouldn't even consider they are not Republicans. Like, they're I wouldn't even say they're like even just Trumpsters. These guys are like anarchists, like as the video has suggested. Like they are here to destroy. Like they're it's the same way
But
that
they
people
think
use, right?
what they're really doing is saving the country, right? I
Yes.
mean, like I think most of them think that, right?
Yeah.
They've just gotten, I want to say, like misinformed to the point of thinking that that's what they're doing. I don't know how they also think that what they're doing is actually going to be successful. But if any of them did think that it was going to be successful, then that's what they think that they're doing, right?
That's true. That's true.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's an unfortunate situation of really them being victims themselves. In all honesty, they've been victims of, quite frankly, one of the biggest con men that we've ever had, and it's been a tragedy really to see this whole thing unfold over the last 5 years, because a lot of people that became in the pro-Trump camp. There's lots of reasons why people did that, but a huge amount of that group was really a lot less of pro-Trump and a lot more of fuck Democrats. And quite frankly, there's a lot of reasons to be on the fuck Democrats train, right? So it's really, really relatable and understandable just how like the door gets opened, as it were. But it's just absolutely wild to still see after 5 years how far and how deep that has actually gotten to them and changed their behaviors. No one likes to ever think of themselves as brainwashed, but like at this point, this is classic cult behavior. Yeah. Earlier you'd mentioned, it's difficult to fire upon crowds that can shoot back, right? And I agree with you. In fact, that's one of the biggest points for actually owning a firearm to a lot of individuals. And I think that, in all honesty, is also to a large extent what our founding fathers intended. So I'm not even going to be pushing back on that concept. But I would say that this protest, it's unfair to characterize it similarly to other famous videos of other riots that we've seen throughout the country. Because first off, this is fundamentally a political protest by definitely an aligned political party populace, not necessarily party leaders, right? Like all the Republican Party leaders actually lambasted the whole thing and decried it. But, everyone there is a Republican or a Trump voter, right? So shooting on that or otherwise using government, lethal force on that type of crowd, that is very, very, very partisan. And like, there's no way that it's not going to be interpreted as partisan. And even if, say, Black Lives Matters, as a counterexample, is predominantly like Democrat, Black Lives Matters is not a Democrat ideal. It's not part of the Democrat, you don't have to be a Democrat to support Black Lives Matters, right?
Yeah.
You do have to be a Trump voter or a Republican or a Trump supporter to support Trump and want his thing. So the two aren't equal, and that would create a very, very, very difficult situation to actually consider using force. Furthermore, most Black Lives Matters protests have been very peaceful.
Yes.
I think a lot of people know that, but without a doubt, several of them turned into full-scale riots. You could say they were hijacked by people that weren't part of the BLM movement, or whatever you want to say. It doesn't matter. Those fundamentally turned into large-scale riots where the people remaining were rioters, right? And if I go back actually to that video, I could pull it up. You're looking at people outside the house, and most of them are still just standing there, being calm, maybe being loud and waving their flag. But as a whole, the vast majority of people that were there were not exactly causing destruction. That would be a smaller group of people directly inside or adjacent to the building. And you still have to get to those people in the first place, but you definitely do not want to start I want to say shooting into the crowd of what is peaceful protesters, right? As much as I disagree with the purpose that they were there, I think what most of them were doing still falls under the First Amendment right to peaceful assembly.
But I don't think that was peaceful.
No, I'm saying that the vast majority of people there were. This is on video. I'll pull up the video.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, okay. Yeah. Some are.
I mean,
maybe
it's not like just a sum. It's the majority of them sort of thing going again. You know.
all I can say is, if you got a gun,
Presumably
you're
after
here to do something,
you talked
right?
about coat racks and tables moved
Yeah.
in front of doors. We
So-
saw a photo, which is just unbelievable that is happening in
Let's see.
the United States
So
Capitol.
these people.
This is likely.
So you and I are in complete agreement that these people on camera are anarchists. Actually, at this point, again, they might be deluded into thinking that the patriots. But you and I are in complete agreement that these are anarchists,
Yes.
and actually, quite literally, deserve to be prosecuted under the law. Right.
As such, yes.
Right. Yeah. All right. But the majority, hopefully, I don't know if this entire video is going to show more, of the crowd or closer reaction. Of course, it's not going to.
Presumably after you
Like
left.
this point here, right? This picture. This is a wide majority of people that are still like, I want to say respecting the boundaries, right? You can see these individuals here. You can see that they are not like spray painting or attacking or like breaking windows. The majority of people in this image right here are literally exercising their right to peaceful assembly, right?
Yep.
And
agree with you
we
there.
don't want the government to get into the bad habit of punishing everyone. We don't want peaceful Black Lives Matters to be punished, just like we don't want peaceful, even in my opinion, misguided, Republicans to be punished for their peaceful right to assembly. That is a First Amendment right, and it should be afforded to all of us, regardless of what we're, pushing for.
And if the Black Lives Matter crowd believes that those that did turn violent during their demonstrations earlier this year, it's not bundling together with everyone else that was peacefully protesting, then they should completely understand the same sentiment that, there's a lot of people out there that, sure, you want to, because of your inner like negativity towards them, want them all to just be thrown out of here for whatever regard. But in reality, a lot of them they're just peacefully protesting. But there are some just people that pushed it much too far, unfortunately.
Yeah. All right. Joining us is Ish. Hey man. So naturally we're talking about the DC. I don't even know what noun I should call it. Riot. I think I'll call it a riot. I mean, what?
Siege.
The siege? Yeah, siege. Actually, siege is a better word. No, I like that. Siege is a much better word. All right, because I don't know if there was a critical mass for that whole thing to be called a riot. Okay, but siege is an absolutely accurate term for what happened. So let's call it a siege. All right. So we've been talking about the DC Capitol building siege, and we've crossed over how most people there think that they're doing the right thing and they're misguided. We've mentioned how like it's the differences between this and say like other BLM protest events, what some of those differences are. But ultimately, like we're all, of course, saddened to see this. Now here's your time to speak, man. What are your first thoughts on this event, on the events of today, the DC siege?
So, I mean, as you and GP know, and hey, Rob, I am a lawyer. So, and I actually called John Marco, who's an old buddy of mine, right as this was happening. And, one of the things that like my constitutional law professors were very emphatic and really forced into us was how important a peaceful transition of power is.
Yes.
Not only for the presidency, but for all legislative positions as well, for all judicial appointments. We just have, like a very strong adherence to votes and appointment processes and government function here in the United States. And we've actually had that for now upwards of 240 years. So for that to be disrupted by, a sitting president who not only incited it, but I thought was very disingenuous in how he was at least attempting, if we want to even call it that, to de-escalate it. It's unimaginable to me. And a core tenet that I was taught, that really all attorneys are taught, and that all government scholars, are very proud to defend, which is the peaceful transition of power is officially over. Our count went from 244 all the way down to 0.
Yeah, that's one way to put it.
Wow. That's crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's kind of crazy. Yeah. Yeah.
So-
Put it that way, I'm like, God damn, yo.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sorry, man, I'm not trying to trip you out, but it's kind of a big deal, you know? It's kind of
It's
a big
already a big deal, like when I saw it on video, but when you added the, with your lawyer background and like talking
Mhm.
about that on a constitutional way, I'm like, that's fucked up.
No, it's crazy, dude. We have this super long history of just obviously there being disputes. I mean, we're all old enough to remember Gore v. Bush. We were all probably kids at the time, but like that was pretty heated too.
Mhm.
But like that still went through. There was no crazy violent stuff that was happening.
There was no literal storming of the Capitol building.
Right.
There were some problems in election offices, but beside that,
Yeah, and it's just the rhetoric is. I don't know. I think he should be impeached for this again. I
Or did.
truly do.
So actually, yeah, that's a good question. All right. So how much responsibility does Trump have for this incident? All right. Now, first off, I want to back it up with like, yes, Trump.
One
has
second, guys. I gotta do something with the oven. Just give me 2 seconds. I'll pause.
All right. So Trump has created the whole background situation, but it's not like Trump, or did he pull the trigger on this? Like, actually, yeah, that's a great question. Did Trump pull the trigger on this? I'm undecided, I guess, on that. What do you guys think?
I feel that he is smart enough to know who his supporters are and what they'll do when he says things, just even in the lightest of senses. Though he can just throw a little bit of gas and it'll create a much larger fire than that usual bit amount of gas usually would. And he is plainly aware of what he is saying and what he is implying with his words. And the problem is the current situation is just, again, unprecedented in so many regards. What responsibility does the current administration within itself, with the vice presidency and those that are calling to invoke the 25th Amendment, what responsibility do they have? Is impeachment a viable and cost-effective, more than anything, option at this point? Because this can very quickly escalate out of control.
Well, as far as escalating out of control goes, it's my understanding that the DC National Guard has regained control. I mean, I just before this started, I had the actual, I don't know what to call the procedure, the procedural, event playing on the TV where all the congressmen are giving their speeches before they're counting or reading, I should say, the votes. So, it is back in, I guess, control as a relative term. But yeah, the genie is to a huge degree out of the bottle. As Ish said, we had 244 years. Now that counts as to zero. Do you think that there's a chance that this is, God forbid, the new normal? Like, are we going to be at this point again in 4 years?
It can't be, and that's why I think we need to apply the 25th Amendment, and I think Mike Pence needs to be our president for about 3 weeks until, 2 weeks, 2 weeks until, Joe Biden's inaugurated. I have no issue with that. He seems to be completely sensible and in control. I don't want, the president to be pulling mechanisms here to strong arm the government. It's not right. A lot of what law comes down to, and I think a lot of what procedure comes down to, is making the right noise at the right time. This president does not know how to do that. And I'll give you guys a clear example. When the BLM protests were going down in D.C. In the middle of the summer, he used active military forces to disperse the protesters, right? Now, even if he wanted to disperse the protesters and do so in a forceful way, he certainly could have called the National Guard. Now, why am I drawing this distinction? Yes, no, I think the atrocities that occurred then would have still occurred, but he's actually allowed to use the National Guard as a bell and whistle. He's not allowed to use the military in a domestic unrest circumstance. So we've clearly seen that this president doesn't abide by the distinctions in procedure that are present in front of him. What worries me, guys, is he's going to continue to, just turn a blind eye to those distinctions, and who knows what he's capable of in the last 2 weeks. I think we're clearly seeing someone here who's got nothing to lose.
It's lethal, dangerous.
So I largely, actually, you know what? I guess I don't know whether I'm playing a devil's advocate or I guess if I'm just exploring the thought myself because I'm undecided. My prediction is that Biden is going to pardon Trump in the interest of making peace. So with that prediction in mind, Trump doesn't go to jail, and accordingly, as a free man, he then is able to do everything that a free guy can, including run for president again. My expectation is that the day of Joe Biden's inauguration, he's going to announce his candidacy for 2024. That's my prediction on that. Because then he'll still have his protected Twitter coverage, as a political candidate. We all know how much he likes Twitter.
Well, Twitter
so
currently is
blocked
banned.
him. Yeah,
Yeah,
he blocked his account.
He's locked.
Yeah.
Wait, when did that happen? I'm out of the loop.
Yeah, I think recently, maybe like 2 hours
This
ago.
happened about an hour ago, I'd say,
hour
or
ago.
two.
Okay.
For 12 or
About
24
2
hours.
ago. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
Twitter blocked-
I'm not someone that follows Donald Trump's Twitter. I have better sanity of mind not following his Twitter. Hopefully, no, I'm not joking. So hopefully you all can respect that.
Sure.
So like, what smoking gun tweets did he make? Today? Because Ish, you were even saying that the 25th Amendment should be invoked. And for everyone watching that doesn't know, the 25th Amendment is the amendment. There's section 4 that says if the vice president, along with a majority of the executives as determined by the legal governing body of Congress, something along those lines, says, then if they all together agree, or not altogether, if a majority of them agree that the president is incapable of performing his duties, that he should be discharged and the vice president will become president.
Right.
So basically saying, Mr. President, you're no longer Mr. President. Vice President, you're now Mr. President. Considering that, I guess, is an option, though, but what would be like the legal impetus? I guess it's uncharted territory, so there is no really legal impetus. Like, this wouldn't
Right.
be a impeachment. This would just be the discernment.
Yeah,
of
yeah,
the
exactly. Right. So I think that's a great question. I think that whether we can causally connect President Trump's incitement of this to it actually happening, I think that that's certainly a worthy line of reasoning to pursue. What I find more egregious is when it had already happened, how incapable he was of calming these individuals down.
Yeah.
And honestly, in my opinion, fanning the flames in that video released on Twitter that everyone saw. And then there are two tweets on Twitter, Pierce. And it's kind of embarrassing that I'm even talking about tweets in context of the 25th Amendment, but that's how he communicates with the public.
Right.
Well, that's the only vehicle I have to go off. There's no media statement. There's no official written press release. He's got 2 tweets, and I actually don't know the content of those tweets because those tweets were removed by Twitter. So it's funny because it goes into the afternoon, and then you see 2 tweets that Twitter has taken off, I think, for incitement of violence. And then on top of that, you have a very lackadaisical, half-hearted attempt video, which basically in many ways fans the flames for these protesters, right? Because it kind of like sings toward their core grievances. So as much as I think, it's certainly worth exploring whether he was the cause of this, his inability to contain and immediately condemn it is what I think is the damning part of the whole picture.
Absolutely. Like the talking about the election in any context during that video as part of it, as roughly half of it, was completely unnecessary as to what should have been the focus of that entire message he sent out to the world as a reaction to this. This isn't a time to talk about that. This is a time to talk about a literal attack on our democratic process. happening in the capital of our country.
Oh, I didn't realize I was still sharing the screen. Or I'm not, but let me be about to. So I'm out of the loop. I haven't seen these tweets. So I went to his Twitter page, and there are 3 different tweets deleted. But you mentioned 2 of them were damning, and I think I found the 2 of them. So we can read them here. Yeah. So these are about 2 hours old. I think. 3 hours old. All right. So Mike Pence didn't have the courage to do what should have been done to protect our country and our Constitution, giving states a chance to certify a corrected set of facts, not the fraudulent or inaccurate ones, which they were asked to previously certify. USA demands the truth. These are the things and events that happen when a sacred landslide election victory is so unceremoniously and viciously stripped away from great patriots who have been badly and unfairly treated for so long. Go home with love and in peace. Remember this day forever. Wow. Okay. So, oh boy. All right. So the second one is hands down very inciting. Remember this day forever, and saying, I mean, I gotta keep my composure.
Yeah, that one's bad. That one's bad.
So the first one is also the damning one, though, in the sense that he's stating his desire for a legal change of. Can I use the word coup? And actually, I'm gonna use it. I'm gonna use the word coup. The first tweet is him saying that he wants Mike Pence to commit a coup. That's straight up what he's saying. Way earlier, this wasn't an episode you were part of, Ish. But several episodes ago, back in December, or I think it was November, before the election. So yeah, maybe October. Either way, before the election, we talked about the possibility that vote totals could still be disputed by this point, and that Mike Pence would possibly have the ability to read from 2 different envelopes, as it were, basically, and pick an envelope that said, "Oh, hey, Trump had won." Now, that was only if the vote totals were still being disputed and legally challenged in courts, and you had 2 different groups of electors going forward. That's not what we actually had. What we actually had was only unified groups of electors and only one envelope, I guess, if you would put it, being put there, where Pence is reading them. I expect now as we're doing this podcast, but we discussed the possibility of basically Pence getting to choose the president by picking the envelope in any possible disputed elections. So that's what Trump is referring to. Trump wants Pence to, conjure votes that didn't happen and read from his own personal envelope at this point, I guess, because Pence doesn't even really have a fucking envelope to read that would say Trump's name on it anyway right now.
Right.
So Trump is asking for a coup at this point, right? He's asking Pence to commit a coup for him.
He is. That's documented. Then you have another tweet that's documented where, listen, I'm not saying that you need to demonize the individual that are storming Capitol Hill. They clearly feel disenfranchised, but you need to strongly deter them from doing what they're doing, and he calls them patriots. Yeah, that's he's stoking nationalism again. So and then this is following on the heels of a 1-hour phone call recorded with the Georgia Secretary of State, where he's asking him to find 11,780 votes.
Right.
Well, guys, I mean, Nixon was forced to resign for much less than this. Much less. We can't just look the other way because this is at the tail end of a presidency. I mean, he has a fiduciary duty to the American people.
That's a big point. And just how he ended it too, to celebrate this moment is, oh man.
Yeah, Rob. No, I get you, dude. It's heavy.
I'm kind of lost of words, to be honest.
I wish that I in advance of this call, I think I should have called up a few of my Trump supporting Republican friends and gotten their opinion on this, because I do have Republican friends that I see on a daily basis, right? They aren't Trump supporting Republicans, so that's I recognize that I live in a influencing bubble that skews liberal, or even if it doesn't skew liberal, the conservatives are actually conservatives. You know, I do not have in my I want to say my daily life, maybe in my like weekly life, but not my daily life. I don't have in my daily life, hey, I support Trump within my immediate circle, right? And I'm wishing, in hindsight, that I had reached out to that circle to ask them to give me their input, because I don't know how you can look at the events of today and think that that is acceptable, and think that Trump is not encouraging that, and think that not encouraging, or think that encouragement is acceptable. I don't know how you can think that, and I really wish that I could ask one of them right now, or seeing if perhaps that their minds has changed in the 12 hours. I don't know.
I mean, there is a difference between, you know, like someone who is just conservative versus somebody who is a Trump supporter, and then people who are there today.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I know lots of conservatives that do not support Trump, and many of them still voted for Trump simply because they thought that Biden or the Democrat Party was simply the worst evil, right? I know a lot of Republicans that fit this category. And like I was saying, that's still in my, you know, my immediate daily circle of interaction. But I do not know as many outside that are just unabashed, proud Trump supporters. I do know several people that fit that bill, but I didn't interact with them today. All right, and today is when this is relevant. So I recognize that between us four, we are presenting certainly one side of this story. And I really, really wish that right now we had the other side to just provide contrast and honestly deeper understanding, because when you understand the other side, you're going to have more sympathy for them, and that just helps you just helps you come together. And very obviously, that is what we deeply need right now.
Yeah.
I certainly see, right, and to second what you just said, Pierce, I certainly see value in conservative principles, right? You know, there's a certain wisdom behind fiscal conservatism. Maybe there's a certain, you know, kind of balancing effect that social conservatism has in society as well. And my qualms really aren't against even the Republican Party at all. But this kind of conduct and condoning this type of conduct is very dangerous. Because remember, anytime a president or anyone in elected office is doing anything, you're setting precedent, right? So it's like, okay, so then, oh, well, Trump did it in 2021. So now, right? So going back to your previous question, is this going to be the new norm? I think the best way we avoid it from becoming the new norm is to ensure that it's condemned.
Yeah.
Which clearly has not been.
No, not yet. Not yet. I mean, they're on the Senate and House floors right now. And it'll be interesting to see how it goes tonight.
It is being condemned by words, but we don't know about how condemned by actions it will be.
Yeah.
I mean, the real prayer, I guess, is that we can, you know, move past this and, like, you know, heal and unify together. But like I said, what if this is the new normal? What if democracies can't handle a nation of more than 320 million people, right? What, like,
okay,
is that potentially?
India's a democracy of more than 1 billion people, Pierce. So gonna have to counter you there. I
don't want to shit on the Indian government, but I don't know if I would count it to be.
Ooh, okay, yeah, that's a whole other. I see where you're going there.
Yeah.
A lot of problems over there too.
Oh, absolutely. No doubt, Rob, no doubt. And no, Pierce is right to maybe say that our processes aren't exactly the most transparent. But I think more than a numbers argument, which I definitely see the value behind. I think that democracies just can't handle social media. I think social media is the real scourge here. I think the way that we're currently communicating is the problem.
Yeah.
Yes.
I can easily agree with that. That I think that democracy wouldn't have any of the scaling up problems if our communication was back to the olden days, right? I easily 100% agree with that. You're not going to find
The context of everyday life for every single person in this country,
Oh wow.
200 or 200 years ago, is completely different, and they have no way of comprehending the modern society as it is today. That document was founded on a context in time, and that time was centuries ago.
right. And now it's the loudest voices or the most controversial voices that are amplified and basically create an impression that is far stronger than their support would actually belie, right? Which in turn does actually grow that support and create it a stronger position than it would have otherwise been. And that's what I was getting at with like the 320 million people. I was like, are we at the point where a small enough group of people can hijack the discussion enough and create these events, and that's what happens? Because like however many, nearly half of the voters voted for Trump. Only a tiny, tiny fraction of people were not peaceful protesters, and yet this happened. That tiny, tiny fraction still existed, and it hasn't existed for the last 244 years, right? So what's different, and what do we do about it?
I think what's different and I think what's challenging is regulating social media, because the problem is the First Amendment is the First Amendment for a reason, and First Amendment case law is very expansionary and very broad. So this isn't an overnight phenomena where social media kind of just rose to power out of nowhere. They have their lobbyists, they have their lawyers, they have their special interest groups that are consistently fighting for their expansion of power and their constant deregulation. So I think we need to regulate social media in a meaningful way, or at least instruct society in a way as to counteract, Pierce, what and I'm going to phrase what you call, one of my favorite thinkers, Naval Ravikant, calls it a crisis of abundance. There's just a crisis of informational abundance right now, right? And how do we curb that? I think that's really our most important question.
And then how strong, I guess, would that implementation be? Because quite frankly, I'm thinking, looking at history, prohibition doesn't tend to work very well, right? So basically, all right, so we modify what social media is allowed to do. Let's pretend that we managed to do so in a healthy, constructive way that everybody's on board with and nobody thinks is violating their free speech, right? Let's have this magical Christmas land.
Cool. All right.
Right. So okay, great, but people are still going to want to have unhealthy communication. Like there's still going to be a desire for it, right? So that social media, I guess, there's no reason to think that the supply won't be met to meet the demand, right? Okay, so new social media organizations are created. Like, do we just play a game of whack-a-mole then with the new organizations? They get built up, we tear them down. They get built up, we tear them down. Like that doesn't.
All right. I get the yes. Demand creates supply.
I'm just trying to think about the actual implementation, right? Like, let's assume that we already managed to agree on what should happen, all right? Which, by the way, I don't know how that's going to happen at all. But again, let's just imagine that the government manages to agree on what should happen. How do they implement it, right? Like, I don't know. I'm not saying that it can't happen. I'm just saying literally I don't know. Like, it's difficult for me to conceive how this actually works.
One thing we need to do, and I think you guys are huge. At least I know Pierce and John Marco are huge supporters of Andrew Yang, and one of the parts of and Rob, and one of the things I really liked about Andrew's platform was he had committees for things like this. this. He had committees for internet communications. I thought it was funny, but I was like, yes, no, we need people that are dedicated within the government to meet these requirements, to meet these demands. The reason, Pierce, I think that we can't even conceptualize it right now is because you're right. Our government is operating really well for 1985, but it's not 1985 anymore. It's 2021. So we do need these dedicated teams that are right, and it's not going to happen overnight. And I think that that's an important part of it too, because I think that we're basically going to head into like a continuous improvement cycle, and I think that that's important.
I like what Andrew was talking about before about bringing back that Department of Technology that was taken away back in like the 90s, because that was around the time when the internet really started to blow up. We might not know how to fix that, but if we have something in place, like I'm sure there's going to be some type of solution that we don't even know in terms of regulating social media, because otherwise, like, where's the people who are in social media? They're just going to stay in that vacuum. They're just going to keep getting fed the same type of information that they think is correct, and then every other type of information that's outside of their circle is considered fake news. And we're seeing this happen. So
I think a general contrast between the topic of speech in general, whereas before the modern era, it was any, I guess, legal. Any time free speech is tested in history, it's mostly because of the topic of what was said. Are you inciting violence? Are you inciting treasonous actions, etc.? But the difference being is that we're not trying to fix this as approach to like what is said. We're trying to limit to control how much is said. Because never before has everyone been able to express themselves, and essentially anyone else can connect with them and have put their finite time throughout the day to like just seeping in public opinion, essentially. And with such an increase in frequency, the negative feedback loop we talked about earlier, where a super small minority make a lot of noise, and everyone has access to that noise through things like social media. It's a self-perpetuating. What's the phrase? Self-fulfilling prophecy that it just gets regurgitated in there, goes back in, and just grows in that regard. When in reality, that isn't the plurality, I would say, of everyone. Like, it's a very, very small vocal minority, as I'm sure everyone agrees, that are being perceived in an what's the word? An uncorresponding scale, like not a proportional scale to what it actually is. It's just hyper focused today because of the nature of the context. Like, this is one of the building blocks of our democracy being attacked right now. And how can the news media and everyone that wants to incite hatred, like, how can they point it at someone or a group of people and try to, at times, unknowingly sometimes, like, give into their lesser instincts? Like, we are much better than all of this. The way to get to the other side, though, is a bigger question right now. Like, how are we going to come out of this with the least amount of scratches on us, I would say, like, metaphorically speaking. Like, it might not be pretty. I don't know where we go from here, like I do a lot of the times, I feel. But for me personally, until Biden is sworn into office, like, that's when I'll finally give some sigh of relief to the whole thing.
I don't know.
I think
Biden's, even with Biden. Oh, sorry, I don't mean to cut you off.
No, go ahead, Rob.
And I was saying, like, I would love for that to happen, but I don't think by Biden officially becoming president would still make a difference. Trumpism.
It's not going to change anything. It's not going to change anything. This transition of power has been more of a transition of everything else but power, like the way people are thinking. Like, there's a transition going on in our country among our people right now. That's the real transition that's happening, not a transition of power. We're trying to the playing field is being set for the next generation of what this country is going to look like right now. Like, it's been going through a lot these past 4 years, but now we're starting to see the lines drawn in the sand in some ways.
Yeah.
I think I think informational abundance is certainly a problem. I think that it is finding its host, and I think it's a catalyst for something that's really going on for a long time now. I would say even through like the 80s and the 90s is when this phenomenon kind of started. But it's institutional decay, right? Institutions across like our entire country, across professions, across fields, whether they be big law firms, banks, academic institutions, government institutions, obviously, there's just a decay in how much faith people place into institutions, into established institutions in general. I think that decay has only accelerated with this informational abundance that we now see with social media, right? So I think that ultimately, if we want things to kind of get back to normal, we would need to then prop up all of these institutions again and to restore faith in the institutions, or reform the institutions to the point where they can adapt everything for our modern age. Because guys, in many ways, a lot of the institutions that are currently operating have been operating since about 1945, and maybe they do need structural reform. I don't know what you guys think about that.
No, our institutions have to be rebooted more than anything in so many ways and just modernized. In some ways, you could have seen that with the lockdowns and coronavirus on Capitol Hill, like Congress and its day-to-day operations had to modernize in a lot of regards. They quickly had to learn how to work from home. A lot of older representatives and older staff had to learn how to use technology in ways that they normally wouldn't, compared to the contemporary nature of how operations were before the pandemic. But now we're seeing a notable shift, but we're still a long, long way to go.
So let me ask you guys a question. The phrase "good enough for government work," what does that mean to you? All right, I've seen Ish laugh. What does that mean to you?
Ish, go ahead.
Okay, what it means to me is basically that if you're going to be in a government job, right, then you're going to kind of go for a second tier position that's comfortable. Your role is nice, comfortable, and inflated. So it's not like you're struggling, but you're kind of you're trading ambition for kind of a second tier existence of consistency.
Okay, John Marco, what does the phrase mean to you?
It is in most contemporary regard just the baseline. Like, hey, it's not what we strive for, but as long as we've dotted all our I's and crossed all our T's on the stuff we got to do, it's good. But it doesn't just say that the baseline can always be raised.
Right. So, Rob, I saw you nodding ahead. That's the opinion you have. Did you want to have a different opinion?
I mean, honestly, that is how I feel. But I guess to put it even further, it's just not trying, really. Like, that's how I feel.
Okay.
To be honest, that is why I don't follow politics for so long until Andrew Yang came out.
So there's a resounding interpretation of that phrase as negative. That good enough for government work, basically.
When really it shouldn't be negative. It should be positive.
Well, so that's why I'm bringing this up. So it used to be that good enough for government work was also a thing that was said. And it used to be that phrase denoted high quality.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, that phrase, I can give you, well, I can't give you examples, but I've seen examples of that phrase being used in that positive capacity as recently as World War II. All right, so less than 100 years. So what changed from then to now to make good enough for government work, where government apparently was top quality, top of the line, at least in consideration of work provided or conducted, I should say, not provided, work conducted or materials purchased or produced? What has changed from it being top of the line to now just barely squeaking by to meet the minimum, and that minimum being a low minimum, right? And how do we turn that back around?
So, at least to answer the first part of the question, I think a lot of that had to do with Reaganism in the 1980s. And, just saying government's part of the problem, government's not part of the solution. By making that statement, I think Reagan and the Republican Party really ever since has made government part of the problem. It was a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? So what you had, and this is really well talked about in an incredible economics book, In Affluent Society by John Galbraith, is this growing distinction between private goods and public goods. And basically what happened is, and what he warned us about was, that public goods, whether it be water fountains, public parks, whatever, were not really keeping pace with like private production of TVs, any private goods, right? And he was basically saying that unless we kind of return this equilibrium, we're going to live in a society where we can be crushed by private production, which is, in my opinion, at least, like where we've kind of come. And this book was written in 1997. So I think that this was a conscientious focus on private production over public goods. How we turn that back around, I'm not sure. Maybe something like what SpaceX has going on with the government, where or Blue Origin, where you have these public-private partnerships. So instead of the public sector always lagging behind the private sector, or the private sector leading, maybe the two could merge to an extent. We could have these public-private partnerships. I don't know the answer to the second half of the question, but that's throwing something out.
So I really think you're onto something there for two overlapping reasons, I guess. So first off, I also think that talent recruitment is immensely important, right? Literally, the government is run by people, right? It might run by a set of rules and codified laws and whatnot, but it is fundamentally made up of people. So if you recruit good people, you're going to end up with good product. That's how every business in the entire world has run since time immemorial, right? Good people equals good product or good, good business. So considering that nowadays government hiring, it's largely impersonal and it's largely checkboxed, and it has evolved into recruiting generally a type of personality that doesn't want to change the world, that has that good enough for government work attitude, right? So you need to fundamentally flip that, right? And I agree that simply allowing to making it easier to hire, making it easier, limiting the scope, I guess, of certain roles, perhaps, or basically just increasing the revolving door, the refresh rate, if you will, of government employees, I think would allow for a more fresh culture, like a more healthy culture, allow for more perspectives that are going to go well. So the second point that I was going to make tying to that is that we can actually look at a very prominent example, or a few examples of that working quite well. And I'd like to point out South Korea and Singapore as those examples.
I was going to say China.
So China's been effective, I guess.
You have no choice. If you're trying to start a business, you have to partner with the government.
You're absolutely right. You do have to partner with the government in China.
Technically, you're right.
And actually, to a degree, I would say Singapore is probably closer to that than it is to South Korea, actually, which is funny because I know I'm using the two as examples, but so yes, you're right. That is certainly effective, right? We can see that it's at least effective. But I like to think that Singapore and South Korea have provided a level of prosperity for their citizens and aren't regularly being lambasted in the 21st century for suppressing democratic rights. So considering that they managed to accomplish both of those objectives, I guess I should have thought this through better. They fundamentally, how businesses work in those two countries and have developed over time is very much in tandem with the government. You mentioned like the Blue Origin's SpaceX, example, and that is totally how it's worked. Like in Korea, they call them chaebols at this point for these big giant like business conglomerates and the guys that run them. And like it's, especially when the country was forming, it's basically like them and the government were like two sides of the same coin, And I would absolutely agree that that is fairly corrupt as well, which is a huge like warning sign. But if, for example, that the private company is effectively the government, then is that actually a problem? Yes, perhaps on a sense of personal enrichment, right? You don't want the government picking winners and losers. But on the results aspect of things, like South Korea went from nothing, absolutely nothing, after the Korean War to now being like the 12th largest economy in the world and making all of our cell phones and TVs. So like you can say that the results at least speak for themselves. Is that the lesser, like, is that the one we want to do? Because there's definitely, like, I'm not saying it's perfect, right? Like, it's definitely got flaws, especially if you look at certain earlier, how do I say, strongman methods of handling internal dissent during its earlier years. And that can be said for Singapore as well. Like, I'm not going to say that like it's the perfect solution, but I can say that their government does seem to be a lot more agile and responsive than ours today, right? So I don't know. I like a lot of what you're saying, Ish, and I guess I figured I'd give you a couple examples
Yeah.
to bear out largely with what you're saying. Is that better though? Like, what do you? Is that better?
I think with the adoption of with the increased adoption of blockchain technologies, outside of just the cryptocurrency, coin token space, into say facilitation and smart contracting between private organizations and governments, I think that we could decentralize that approach to where we can make transparent these public-private partnerships, so we're not worried about overwhelming bureaucracy from like a third-party intermediary, which is really what was going on in Singapore and South Korea. And I think you're absolutely right for us to be wary of that. But now, thankfully, we have the concepts and the technologies of blockchain, which is really nothing but a more particularized and more streamlined data storage, right? Applying those benefits, we could go ahead and maybe remove this central third party intermediary that would be a burden at that point.
Blockchain, that's an interesting one. Wow.
Yeah,
I like that.
Applying it, right? Applying it to achieve the stated goal.
I like that idea a lot.
So I see you're on the crypto train.
I am on the crypto train.
Yeah. I know a lot of people that think crypto is the second coming of Jesus, practically. So I guess to me, perhaps as a mild skeptic, how the heck is blockchain going to solve anything? Because you still have decisions being made, right?
Right. So blockchain, cryptocurrency is a form of blockchain, right?
Yes,
so
I'm aware.
Cryptocurrency is blockchain applied for the purpose of financial transactions, right? Or the purpose of currencies, or the purpose, sometimes you have these digital ICOs, right? So for the purpose of raising capital, right? So blockchain can also be applied, right? Which is it's really a data storage mechanism. It could be applied to solve supply chain solutions. It could be applied to urban planning. It can be applied to logistics. It can be applied to numerous, like organizational processes to reduce bureaucracy at large corporations. I mean, right now, that's what I think is going to happen over the next 3 to 5 years. I think corporations, larger organizations even, are going to revise and revamp their bureaucracy and their cost structures, because keeping these third-party intermediaries on is both costly and ineffective. So, what I'm saying is blockchain, not cryptocurrency, but blockchain as a mechanism to remove the third-party bureaucratic element of the government control and to keep the transparency between the private parties, right? And then the respective specified government actors in the private-public partnership, right? So like SpaceX needs to deal with NASA, right? Blue Origin needs to deal with NASA. Blue Origin doesn't need to deal with Department of Commerce, right? And I think, right, and don't quote me on this, but I think Department of Commerce actually oversees NASA, right? So, and then obviously the president oversees the Department of Commerce, and we have this giant administrative state. So instead of having to deal with DOC and everything like that, SpaceX can transact or deal directly with NASA as the independent government agency. So you have this public-private partnership without then reaching into the higher, more centralized, more bureaucratic aspects of government, like Department of Commerce, and then say, the administrative cabinet positions that govern them, and so on and so forth.
Okay, so my question though, and I guess problem, and perhaps it's from a point of lack of understanding, but yes, I know crypto and blockchain are fundamentally different. Blockchain is a public record, and is a public record that the user of the record does not have control over. All right, so that's important to also recognize. It is a public agreement that this is the record. Cool. How does that change how decisions are made?
It changes how decisions are made because it forces everyone to be transparent. I think that changes everything.
How so? Like me saying, all right, you know what? I decided that I'm going to go hire SpaceX instead of Blue Origin, right? Like, how does blockchain? Oh, thank you, Ross. How does that decision? How is that recorded in the blockchain? Other than like, okay, this is what I did, and like I can say that this is why I even made that decision, right? We can create a blockchain that'll include, and here's all the reasons for why I made that, but like. You can largely, okay, I guess, so do you have any experience working in the government?
Yeah, I actually am. I'm a former prosecutor.
Okay.
So state, local government, yeah. Okay.
So thank you for that example. So you're, I guess, further down the line, I guess, of certain things that I've perceived. So I'm aware, for example, that let's say I want to hire someone, all right? And let's say that, quite frankly, I've already decided who I want to hire. All right. Well, in the government, that can still happen. And the way that happens is I simply write the job description to have niche things that person has. So like saying the ideal candidate would have spent 1 year living in England. Or something like I can literally write whatever I want, and then only people that meet that item, and then the next obscure item, and then the next obscure item are allowed to be considered because I tied those attributes as being requirements to the job, right? So when you say, okay, I mean, this blockchain will make it all public. Yeah, sure, I can make it public that these are the requirements, and that this company met those requirements. But that doesn't change that I still get to write what the requirements are. I still get to choose yes, that person filled the requirements. And I think it's ridiculous to think that just because, it's public and available, that the public is going to keep that close an eye on all the different things that the government is doing. I think it's absolutely ridiculous to think. So how does it change decision making?
It changes decision making because I think so going right back to your example, I think there's less delegation from the top. I think there's more decision making made organically at the grassroots level because, the individuals right on the floor have direct access. So like say the leaders at NASA have direct access to the leaders at SpaceX and vice versa, right? In a way, in an interconnectedness that they otherwise would not have had, say 40 years ago, because 40 years ago, they would both be kind of beholden by DOC. You see? So I'm not saying DOC still doesn't bring down the rules, but now you can communicate directly with the agency or the level of government that you need to without going to that higher part.
Okay, I mean, yeah, like I agree that private-public partnerships can increase efficiency. It's funny actually that we mentioned SpaceX and Blue Origins as examples of that, because actually the previous private-public partnership, the United Launch Authority, basically got nothing done for like 2 decades until SpaceX arrived and actually, provided competition. So it's certainly not foolproof, but all the same, I definitely agree with the general trend that private-public partnerships can be more efficient. All right, so you've got me on that, but I'm just wondering about the blockchain aspect itself. I don't see the value add, I suppose, or not necessarily the value add. I can't necessarily say that it would automatically be worse, aside from potential security risk of establishing pattern of behavior. But ignoring that security risk, I think that it could be a value add. Hey, everybody can have inspection, right? And it keeps the government more accountable. Cool. I just don't see how it would actually be used to change the results, change the decision making.
Right. I see. I see where you're going with that. I'm probably gonna have to. To get back to you on that because this is actually the first time that I've conceptualized it in the private public space and as a facilitator for private public partnerships. But
Sure.
I think that there may be some application there because I think there is concern that you don't want to be the next Singapore. You might not necessarily want to be, the next Korea either. Just in terms of the level of influence that those governments are able to exert on their people. In other words, you might want something that's more distributed.
Yeah. I'm certainly not a professor or expert. I don't know why I said professor. An expert of South Korean civil liberties, but my understanding is that post like 1990, they've been pretty solid on the Democrat front. That's at least been my general impression, and I'm happy to be corrected if someone wants to provide me. Oh, that they actually don't have freedom of speech. Like, if somebody wants to correct me, you can. Like, I know that they don't have pornography, for example, right? I'm not saying that they're the United States. They're not a copy of us by any means, but as a whole, they're typically like pretty strong on the Democratic front, like post 1990. So like, I don't know. I don't know where I was going with that. Just insight. Rob, you're leaning close, man. What's on your mind?
I'm just curious to know how blockchain, because regardless whether we like believe in it or not, it's here, and it will. I do think it will fundamentally change many different systems, as it already has with currency, for example. So I could see how it could do it with same thing in terms of government, private and public services. I don't know how, but I think you are onto something, and I don't know anything about. I don't know much about it. I just have a hunch that something interesting could happen from that. Centralizing, if like taking away from the power of the government or just from power of bureaucracy, I think is huge. And that's something that we have the ability to do that our ancestors have not been able to do. We have the internet. So, yeah, I'm curious about that.
I think our ancestors would be very proud of our internet invention, Rob, for sure.
Oh, they would be like, "Whoa, an email! Oh my God, I can see like people from the other side of the country, or what?"
Yeah,
I can just order food online, whereas before I had to shoot guns, or I had to like come out with a spear. Like, I know.
Yeah. Now it just takes a click and it's delivered right to your door.
Mm-hmm.
I think they'd say it'd be a lot easier to organize a revolution with the internet, and I guess that's kind of the accuracy of that statement. I think is part of the struggle that we're dealing with now, because we're not really looking for a revolution. We're looking for reform, I would think. I don't know. I guess some people are already past the reform stage and into that revolution. But, I love our country deeply, and I believe that she can be better. And I think that we should work to make her better.
Definitely. I agree with you, man.
100%, man. I think that's the kind of thinking we need now more than ever. Maybe one positive thing that comes out of 2020 and now rolling into 2021 is the death of American exceptionalism. Because I think we do need to look to other countries and to other problem solvers to figure out what we can make work better here. And obviously also lend our expertise to other countries and other systems as to what, works here that can work better there.
Yeah, I still damn well think that we're quite exceptional. Thank you very much. But I am under no arrogance of thinking that if someone else does something right, that we can't look at that for lessons, or when someone else does something wrong, that we can't look at it for lessons. Or just, like there's no reason to put our heads in the ground.
Exactly.
Yeah. Healthcare. I guess I'll be bringing up Korea again. Universal. So like I'm actually known to a lot of people as their conservative friend. To give you, I guess, some perspective, and a lot of them consider I'll be like taking a conservative stance on any other issue that they care about. They might be shocked to hear that I'm a very strong supporter of universal healthcare. All right, and like in particular, I'm referring to a single payer option, right? And I think that basically no better example of it exists than in South Korea, where you can see just how pervasive and accessible it's gotten to everyone, while also acknowledging the flaws that I have, because it's not a perfect system. There are drawbacks for the exchange, but I can look at those and I can say, hey, you know what? This is what we get that's good. This is what we get that's bad. The good outweighs the bad. Here's how they've implemented it. Let's just do that. Let's just copy their system. Like, it's okay to do that. We don't have to. Our American exceptionalism, we can be exceptional while still also learning from others. We don't have to be the absolute first or best in everything. We will not be the best overall. We will not be the most exceptional overall if we don't learn where we are weak and improve it. I think that's imperative to maintain.
I think that's 100%.
Yeah, it's imperative.
Right. I mean, then you get back into things like game theory with econ, right? Where it's like it's always a little better to collaborate than it is to truly compete.
And I think Americans we realize that. Even, the most stuck up, like, oh, America's always going to be number one, can do no wrong attitude, like, you recognize that, no, you don't want to be planting your own crops, that someone else can be doing it a lot more efficient. You recognize that it is better to have purchased a t-shirt, whether that t-shirt was made in the United States or made in Chile. You recognize that it is cheaper for you to work doing something else and just buy that shirt than it is to make it yourself, right? Like, we all know this. We all know that specialization, that learning from others, that taking the best that they offer and then providing the best that we can offer. We know that that's the best way to run a society, because that's how we interact with society every single day. We all know this.
Really, Trumpism is a reaction to that, right?
Yeah.
And it's basically saying, no, let's stop doing this. Let's make our t-shirts here. I want this to be, like, we need to this outsourcing. This globalization's a sham. We need to turn inward. I think that's the core message of Trumpism. So, right, not republicanism, not conservatism, Trumpism. So, I think that's really dangerous, and I think that the U.S. and a lot of countries worldwide are taking more of that insular stance, India included, with Prime Minister Modi. So that. And it's great that you and I obviously think Rob and GP have the same perspective in terms of the power of collaboration, but I think the world is heading towards a more insular, competitive posture.
That happened years ago, man. And I guess you're making a good point, though, that's not stopping, right? It's not slowing down.
Right.
We have not reached full. Yeah, we haven't reached full saturation of that.
No.
Yeah.
Right. That's what I meant to say. No, it's been happening since about 2008, right? It's been happening for a minute. I would say 2008 was like peak globalization. Is how I would frame it.
All right.
Well, I hope we could return back to pre-2008 then, because we definitely pre-2008, pre-crash, pre-everything.
Yeah. All right. Anyway, I think that's been a good episode, I think, for all of our listeners. John Marco, you've been quiet for a little bit. Did you want to start us off on something or finish off with something?
No, I actually really appreciated this conversation. It was really good. It's been a very long day for me emotionally. But
I feel that.
It's just one step at a time. A lot of great perspectives today, a lot of branching off of different topics of discussion. That was really dope. And we just have to see what the next day, not just the next day, the next hour brings, honestly, at this point.
Yeah, man.
But we're going to figure this out.
All right. Shout out to Sue for being our most reliable and excellent fan. You're amazing. Thanks for watching.
Love you, Sue.
And thanks for watching everyone else. Y'all have a good, safe, and hopefully peaceful day. We'll get through this.
Mm-hmm.